Today we are going to look at this beautiful blue camera that has a magnificent APS-C size sensor, the IMX571 from Sony, which is the same sensor that you can find in the QHY268 cameras or the ASI 2600 cameras. And we'll be looking at what this camera is and what my first impressions of it are. Hey guys, Quiv the Lazy Geek here and welcome back to my balcony. Today we're looking at this beautiful little blue camera which is called the RISINGCAM ATR3260000KMA. There's also another model that ends with KPA. The KMA is the monochrome version of the camera. The KPA version is the color version of the camera. They both use the Sony IMX571 APS-C size sensor. One is the color version, the other is the monochrome version, and I bought actually one sample of each camera. But first, you may ask, what is RISINGCAM? RISINGCAM, as far as I understand it, it's a Chinese brand that rebrands products from a manufacturer called Touptek. I believe, I'm not completely sure. There are tons of variations of this camera manufactured by Touptek. One of them is the Altair Astro cameras. Seem to be rebranded versions of those cameras, although they might have like dedicated electronics or slightly, different twists on it. For me, it's basically the same as the original Touptek camera with the same price. And the only reason I bought the RISINGCAM version is because RISINGCAM on their AliExpress webpage, which is where I bought from, specifically mentions astrophotography in like a smart and understandable way, whereas other shops selling the same camera or rebranded versions typically didn't. Now, why did I buy a Chinese brand on AliExpress rather than buy ZW with like local dealers here that can deal with warranty or issues, or QHY would be the same? It's the main reason was actually the diameter, the physical diameter of the camera. I want to use it, and I am using the color version. It's currently attached to my Celestron C6 with Hyperstar, and the diameter of the ZW version, for instance, is 90 millimeters, which adds to my central obstruction more than I am willing to accept. This one is 80 millimeters diameter, which is just 2 millimeters more than the ASI 533 MC Pro, which I have been using. The camera, both the color and monochrome versions, also happen to be quite a bit cheaper than the ZW variant. And to give an idea, I bought the two cameras, one color, one monochrome, for just slightly more than a single ZW ASI 2600 mm Pro would have cost me here in Japan. So it's really, it's a good deal, let's say. Now, what's very interesting with those cameras is that they come with the same sensor. They actually come with a variant of the sensor that's like industrial grade. I'm not sure if that makes an actual difference, but there are two different spec sheets on the Sony website. The spec sheets are completely identical, except that the one with the industrial sensor doesn't put any restrictions on use, whereas the normal sensor says it should be used in consumer products. So this sensor is for industrial applications. It always feels good to know that. And at the back of the camera, we have typical stuff that's basically typical of ZW cameras as well. We have a USB 2.0 hub with the main USB 3 plug. We also have a DC 12 volt input. And behind this piece of Gorilla Tape, because I didn't have electric tape readily available, there are actually 4 LEDs telling you the status of the camera, of the tech, of the fan, of everything. But because I use this for Hyperstar as well, I wanted to hide the light from the LEDs. And it so happens that with a single piece of tape, it's easy to completely block the light. It doesn't leak into the ports next to the LEDs, which is really good and unlike the ZW camera. At the front, we have M42 threads, I believe, and we have a back focus distance from the flange of the camera of the threads to the sensor of exactly 17.5 millimeters, which so happens to be the exact same distance that ZW cameras, the 2600mm and MC Pro cameras have. So you can really switch one from the other without having to worry about back focus. And that's one of the reasons that I bought this as well, because I had my Hyperstar setup was for ZW ASI cameras, and with this I don't have to change anything. I don't have to add spacers, change anything. I was able to just switch the cameras and it just worked, which was great. The camera itself, actually, each camera, the color and the monochrome camera, came with this chunky box here. And that chunky box, I don't even remember what's in there, had a CD that I never used. It had like bag and the dust cap for the camera, and it had a DC adapter, a USB 3 cable, whatever, like 2-inch nose piece adapter, this kind of stuff, which, you know, I already have my stuff for that, so I didn't use them, and I just, like, you know, keep this chunky box out of the way somewhere in my home. Okay, let's have a look at the specs of those cameras. You can see I have the AliExpress pages for the RISINGCAM cameras for both the color and the monochrome sensor. So I have here the monochrome sensor camera. I have here the color sensor camera. And for the color camera, you can choose whether you want the glass in front of the sensor to be an IR cut filter or whether you want just anti-reflective protective glass. This is what I chose because if I want to do IR UV cuts, I want to add my own filter, and that way I have more possibilities. And yeah, you can tell the price is slightly cheaper, let's say, than ZW. Of course, you're buying from AliExpress. If this camera breaks, I honestly have no idea what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm going to contact the vendor, but what service am I going to get out of that? I don't know. The camera itself, by the way, is sealed. You cannot refresh the desiccant. There's even like do not open here. So it's like, it's not something that that users would be able to fix on their own very easily, as far as I can tell. So the low price comes with risk. You know, there's no free lunch. But you know, for me, like, the low price was one argument, but the actual physical dimensions of the camera was what I was looking for in the first place. So yeah, if we look at the specs, we can see like the IMX571 BQR-J for industrial grade sensor, apparently. And you know, we have the typical stuff, 42 degrees below ambient. Obviously we're in winter, I haven't been able to test that out yet. We have also a dew heater, there's a low read noise mode, and one of the things that made me buy this camera is that it's fully and natively supported by Nina, which is the capture software that I use, because obviously, since this is not a ZW camera, I cannot use the ASI Air with this. Which means I'm not sure what to do with my ASI Air now. It's a great little piece of equipment, but that doesn't work with this. And if we look at some of the other specs, it's like the standard IMX571 specs in terms of the sensitivity to different wavelengths that we can see here. But what I found very interesting is that you can separately choose low gain and high gain, versus like for ZW cameras with the same sensor, it switches between the two at gain 100. So the only way you can choose low gain is by imaging below gain 100, and then at gain 100 or more, it switches to high gain. And what was very interesting, so with the low gain charts that we see here, the big advantage, or the only advantage that we have, is that we have above 14 stops of dynamic range. But for now, I've only used it in high gain conversion mode. I don't see why, or I don't see the need for using it at a low gain, because the read noise is so much lower. And you can see the read noise curve here. I haven't measured the sensor with sharp cap, but I've seen others on cloudy nights who have, and their results are very close to the published curves on the RISINGCAM page that we are looking at here. So there's always that, and we can see that the read noise is actually sub 1 electron, which sounds a bit too good to be true, especially since the ZW version is above 1 electron throughout its gain range, including in high gain conversion. So I'm wondering what exactly, like how this is even possible. But the SharpCap sensor analysis tool for others on cloudy nights seem to have confirmed that. And looking at this, you can see that on the very left hand side we have gain 100, but it might make sense to even use the camera at gain 150 to even reduce the read noise some more to something like 0.85, which is crazy low. And I believe this is with the low read noise mode that can be enabled as is in Nina. And to be clear, I have not used this camera with anything else than Nina, and it works great in Nina for now, and same for the color version of the camera. So if this wasn't clear, this is not a review, this is first impressions of the camera. And the high gain conversion mode, we get dynamic range that starts at 14 stops rather than 14.4 or something like that with the low gain. And maybe the low gain would be useful only for applications like photometry as far as my needs go. Now, in terms of the performance of the sensor, it's like it should be pretty much similar to the ESI QHY versions. It's which means that it's completely free of amp glow, and because it's free of amp glow, I don't need to use dark frames. I have dark flats that I use as bias frames. Because when the camera is cooled, it's pretty much the same thing. I have flat frames, and that's pretty much it in terms of calibration. And when I look at the results, here are some examples of results with the California Nebula here. This is a calibrated frame, 300 seconds long at a gain 100 at the high gain mode of the camera. We have the same thing on SH240, the spaghetti, kind of like the brains in space. Both are through an H-alpha filter with this camera, the monochrome version. For the color version, I have this test here with an L-Extreme filter at 300 seconds, so again 5 minutes. And again, all of those images are very clean. They don't show any amp glow. They've been bias and flat calibrated, and it's nothing else. It basically works just like my 533 MC Pro, except that the sensor is bigger, so I have more field of view for the same telescope. That's it. It's only like a net benefit compared to the 533. And as far as I can tell, up to now, for me, it has worked great. And I've gotten some really cool final images with this camera. Yeah, again, like, this is not a review. This is just like my first impressions of the camera. For me, like, it works really well. It's far cheaper than the ZW version. I paid extra for shipping with UPS, but they shipped with FedEx in the end because they told me UPS had trouble shipping from China. And I got the delivery like in a week or so after I ordered. And yeah, it's like the total cost was so much cheaper than the established brands that, you know, there's a risk associated with it. I don't know how the warranty will work, but for now, in terms of using the camera, like, I have no issues, and I am very, very satisfied with my purchase. Will it hold up in the long term? That I do not know. We'll see. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover today. My first impression of this little camera. Again, RISINGCAM, rebranded camera made by Touptek. The same cameras, but with maybe tweaked electronics, might be found at like manufacturers like our sellers like Omegon or Altair Astro. I'm not sure how all of this works. All I can say, this camera works great with Nina, native driver, awesome. What the future holds, I have no idea. And I'll put the links down in the description to the AliExpress pages. They are not affiliate links, so yeah, knock yourselves out. With that, that's all I wanted to cover, so thank you so much for watching, as always, and thank you so much for your support. We are a couple of days after Christmas. It seems that we're going to have good weather tonight. I've been a bit on an Astro slump in the past couple of weeks, but hopefully I'll find the will to image tonight. We'll see. As always, you know, subscribe, leave a like, leave a dislike, leave a comment, all this kind of stuff. Do you own this camera? What are your opinions about it? Would you risk buying this camera? Again, don't take my word for it. I haven't done any like stress test on it. First impressions only. Again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget whenever you can to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.